Hi guys, welcome back. So in our last lecture we talked about how to block in a rough sky and how to pull that off. We basically, just a little review, we talked about having a little bit of a darker grade up on top, and I could still darken this a lot more. And then I just showed you how to create a couple base clouds with some different brushes and create that contrast. Definitely want to have that spherical change happening where we're getting a little bit darker from up on the top here and we're fading down. Now, one of the other things I wanted to address with you guys real quick, because I just didn't want to go over just this is a real basic approach, but I also want to talk a little bit about perspective, and depending on the piece that you might be working on, how the perspective could change, and using and creating clouds to your benefit could actually adapt part of your composition in your piece to better suit the overall piece that you're working on. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn all these off, and I'm just going to go back here to sort of this really base blue color that I have right here. Okay, what I'm going to do real quick is I'm going to create a layer here. I'm going to label this I'm going to draw on this right now because I want to show you guys how to create a little bit more depth. When I turn this back on and you look at what I have, there's not really any depth taking place here. There's suggestive depth. I have some clouds in front, some that are a little bit blurred and so on. We ran this through a filter, but it's just like a sort of a backdrop painting. There are times when that's just fine for something that you're painting. It'll be pulled off, but then there are other times where we want to be able to go a little bit past that. So I thought I'd walk you through some steps basically on how to create a sky that would exist in a more in-depth perspective. Okay, so I have this layer right here. I'm going to call this my draw layer, and I'm going to come over here. I have this one particular pencil that I really like that has a nice brush. And what I'm going to do is, one thing I never did on this is we were sort of talking about the horizon color down here going a little bit more into that sort of turquoise, which is like a much lighter blue, is the spherical effect of the world is changing, right? So now I'm going to come in here and draw in something that if any of you guys ever had me for the environment sketching class, which hasn't come out yet, but it will, or the perspective class, one of the things that we talk about quite often is how to use grids and sketch out a rough grid to establish more depth inside our picture plane. So I'm going to do that right now. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to come down here. Hold on a minute. Let's figure out why. Maybe I need to go a little bit darker. I'm in brush, 100%. Deselect. That's weird. What am I doing wrong here? Okay, I'm in brush. Oh, that's why. I hit B, and I'm still on the smudge tool. No wonder why it wasn't working. Okay, there we go. All right, so now I have this brush tool. So let me come in here. Let me go down about 60% grade. I'm just going to come in here, hold down Shift, and I put like a little bit of a horizon line right there. So now I understand that principle of perspective that we talked about in the very beginning. And then what I can do, and I do this whenever I sketch and thumbnail when I build an environment, is now I can come in here and I can throw down what I call like a rough grid plane here. And I'm doing this freehand right now. I'll try to get a straight line in there, try to get a line going across there. So by having that grid in there, it's a great way to work because it allows me to start seeing depth. Because if you look up here, now I have this sort of this large square shape here. So if I come down here and I want to make like a rock and bring it down to the ground plane, I have now this sort of rock here. If I want to have a rock protrude upward down here, I have a rock that's in my foreground. And then the same thing, I can now come back in here and I can have a good understanding the distance from here to here is somewhere in my midground. So if I come over here and I want to have something protrude out like this, coming down, now I have maybe a rock structure that's coming, it's landing inside the midground. Everything that I just did right there on the ground plane, I can also do with the sky plane. Okay, so the bottom ground that is your grid plane, you need to think of your sky as being a plane as well. And so I wanted to show you a couple pictures real quick. I uploaded these to our blog, okay, last night. Some of you might not have seen it because I had some problems getting these up, but I actually put some reference up here for you guys talking about different types of clouds and where they tend to be in relationship to the atmosphere, because they're actually, these clouds sort of are dictated by the weight and pressure of our world, of our sphere, okay? And so you'll see certain clouds at different depths. And I put up here, know what you're painting and take the time to gather the reference to make your work accurate, okay? So that would be the difference between somebody on DeviantArt who's just throwing clouds in there And if you have this huge sky shot city of Chicago and it's a rainy day, you would have an understanding that there's going to be a certain type of clouds. And so if you click on some of this other reference, you'll notice some of these sort of spotty clouds that are up here tend to be a lot smaller versus some of these larger clouds, like what I call the stratus, the nimbostratus, stratocumulus, or the cumulonimbus. These clouds tend to be puffier and sort of spread out a little bit more. Okay. Give me a second. I had to silence my phone there. It kept buzzing. All right. So let me back up there for a second here, and let's scroll down here. So these are the pictures that I took with my iPhone right here. Okay. Look at these huge cloud structures, and what's really cool is look at some of the depth that's being created. One way in drawing that we create depth is by overlapping shapes on top of other shapes. In order to correctly be able to do that, you have to have an understanding of perspective and how a grid plane works. If you have that understanding, you can sketch that up first. You'll be able to create something that's more in this particular genre. Okay, so look at these. Isn't that a cool picture? That was actual rain starting to come down, and the sky is getting this weird yellow tint. Okay, but look at this large cumulonimbus cloud up here, and then you can see up here it's sort of spacing out. There's some thinner clouds in the back. That's a rain cloud right there. Okay, I had a wide-angle picture of it too. I took that while driving, which I probably shouldn't have done, but okay. Look at those clouds. Look at how cool those are. And look at the atmospheric perspective. Look at how, if I were to bring up the color swabber right now and swab all the colors of these bushes up in the front here, they're going to be in that 50 to 70% ratio. Once I start swabbing the colors of that mountain range, which is in the background right here, that's going to be in that probably 60 to 30% ratio. Okay, and then once I get back in here, all of this is going to fade into some of that lighter ratio. And then look, as the clouds come closer to me right here, like the blue clouds and these clouds right here, if I swab those, I can just tell by looking at those, the value of those clouds right now are probably, in fact, let's do that real quick. Let's just do that. I didn't think about it. Let me grab this picture. Let me drag it to the desktop here. Let's bring it up here. And again, this is a great benefit of just being able to analyze something real quick with Photoshop. Let's bring up the color picker, grab that, see where that is? Up there. If I come back here, let's grab something in the middle, it's jumping up. If I come back in here, that's jumping up a little bit more. I get back in here, it's jumping up even more. I come back there, it's jumped up. Okay, so I have a steady progression going from here to here, which is the atmospheric perspective happening inside the scene. Same thing with the clouds. If I come back here and swab this cloud here, now some of the values might be a little bit darker. That's going to be like a pure white. Let's go down here. That's up in like 20-30 range, right? And now look at this. Okay, that's like a 50. Okay, that's up towards the 50. But you can notice in the photo, so the clouds aren't going to go to pure black, but they are a lot darker, around a 50% range. And then as they sort of fade back over here, they get a little bit lighter. Okay, so that means you could actually paint something just like that image that's right there. Okay, let me go back to the blog real quick here. So those are just, here's another one I saw driving. Big giant puffy cloud on that road. I thought this one was really neat too. Because there's an artist, I got it, Marshall Vanders put a link on his website. There's this great illustrator. I got to find his name. He actually will take pictures of clouds like that. You see how there's a puppy dog in there? You see that with like the head, the feet, the ears? And he'll take pictures of clouds and he does illustrations off of those clouds and turns them into character designs, which is a really, fascinating approach. But I just took those with my phone and look at the cool variations. Look at how dark that is. Is that more towards my foreground? Absolutely. Okay, look at how much lighter it is back here and back in there. Okay, that value compared to that value, totally different. So as you start to paint clouds and you paint something a little bit darker, that's going to appear to be coming closer towards you. And you paint something lighter, it's going to recede back. Okay. All right, and then I just put some other cloud reference here that I grabbed from online. Clouds, what's I find to be interesting about clouds is that if you paint them in an environment, I like to paint the clouds first, and then I like to come back like we did in the first assignment, talk about the highlights. And if I look at the time of day and where the sun's coming from, then I could come back in here and I could address, the sun has sort of an orange glow to it, which might be transitioning and it might be giving me a yellow, orange to pink transition and highlights on some of the clouds, and that's how we get some of these really fascinating um, uh, variations in our sets. I found this picture here. I thought this is really cool because here we're sort of, this is up high in the mountains, because see what's happening? We're looking on top of the clouds. So that's a great little composition. Okay, great little reference there. You can imagine painting that where you're up so high, your horizon line's up here and you're looking down on top because this hill drops off. Okay, pretty cool. So what I thought I'd do is real quick, I just wanted to go back into Photoshop here, and I just wanted to talk about how you can start to paint and create clouds in perspective instead of just the flat approach that I showed you yesterday. Okay, so one of the things that I like to do is I come in here and I'm going to pick two vanishing points that are way off my screen, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to come in here like this. I'm going to throw a rough grid. Just going to do this freehand real quick like so. Okay, then I'm going to come back in and do it the other way. Like that. Okay? All right, give me a second here. Okay, so there we go. So now I have that grid in there, and the reason why the grid is so valuable is it allows your mind to break up sort of spatial relationships and immediately allows you to see depth. So when I look at this right now, if I were to come in here and start sketching, I'm looking up under a cloud, so I could have this huge cloud that's right here, and that might be part of the top of the canopy. And then as it recedes back here, what's going to happen? When something recedes back, it gets smaller. So if I come back in here, I might be able to come in here and I might be looking under a cloud, and it's going to be a lot smaller. Okay. Now, technically, I've had this battle before with the student. I could draw a huge cloud in the background and have a smaller cloud in the front. I absolutely could do that. And you could pull that off. But with just the general rule of thumb, that if I measure, this is a perspective thing, when we talk about the scale, which is the distance from here to here, that if I were to bring that scale back here and draw, something back here that was like about that big, that cloud is the same size as that cloud. It's just that that cloud is receded back in perspective. Okay, so there's some knowledge to have there about perspective and how it's working. A lot of times when I work, you'll notice in a couple pieces that I have, I do this little fill signature thing. I have this cloud that swirls a little bit, and I do this thing. I saw it one day when I was in Chicago where I just had my cloud spin a little bit like this. Then I put a top onto it like that. So that way I have an underneath to my cloud, and then I have a side to it. But now it's overlapping in my cloud. I have what I call a line of action in my cloud, okay? And this is more of a stylized thing, but if you look, that's the line of action that's happening. My cloud's turning, okay? So you can do that if you like. You don't have to have just clouds flat across. That's one approach. Another approach is if I come in here now, let's go to X, let me switch colors, okay? I can start painting that cloud, and then I could come back over here, and then I could start painting another cloud behind it. And then I could start stacking clouds on top of each other, and what's going to happen when I overlap shapes on top of other shapes, I create depth. And if I start to do that inside so let me just draw that really quick. Imagine that I have this here, maybe have underneath of another cloud. Maybe there's a little small cloud here that's sort of connected that overlaps that. And then if I come back in here, let me just put sort of this cloud shape like that. Okay, and then as this goes back, I'm going to get some smaller clouds. I just like to throw my clouds in real rough to get an idea of what they're doing. So now if I put something behind this, like this, and it gets overlapped there, it's going to start to look a little bit smaller. And as I recede back here, I'll get a little smaller. So I'm just roughing this out really quickly. Okay. Now, I use this as a template to go by. It's not my official, law-abiding drawing. This is how I start to develop. But can you see right now how I have this cloud? Hold on a minute. Let me go to eraser. Let me switch erasers. So let's go to 100%. Once I erase that out there, do you see how I have some depth that's starting to create inside my environment now? Okay, I have a lot more depth. It's not nearly as flat. And that's for two reasons. One is because I have clouds that are receding back in perspective. Number two, I'm able to see underneath them, which they might be a little bit darker, and therefore I could come and make the tops a little bit brighter. Okay. And the other reason is, number three, is that I have overlapping shapes. That shape overlaps this shape, so you can't see that line that goes before it. Your eye immediately pulls this cloud in front. Okay. Watch. Let's say I wanted to throw another cloud right here in the front, completely overlap all of this like this. Draw the base of the cloud like that, and then just come in with your eraser. And if I erase that, see, oops, I immediately created more depth because now I have a large cloud here. Okay, so let's just talk about what we have here. I have this surface, this cloud overlaps that cloud. Okay, so which clouds, if I were to number these, let me create another layer here I can throw away real quick. If this was 1, 2, 3, and 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, let's say 9. I got 9 different clouds. Which cloud is closest to me right now in perspective? Cloud number 1 is. Okay, and so cloud 3 and 4 could be tied in terms of their placement. Okay, but I don't know yet. 4 could recede back a little bit further in perspective, so that could be a little further back. So now, what's closer to me, cloud 2 or cloud 4? Depending on the perspective, if I'm in 2 point, and if I were to bring this line downward onto the grid that I had down below here, and come back from the line that's creating that cloud and figure it, that cloud technically we would be above this point right here on the ground, would be directly above it. But then when I come over here to 2 and I bring that line down, you see how that would be hitting right in front of me? Okay, so it doesn't look like it. That's sort of a little bit of an illusion there, but 2 is actually a little bit closer because it's a little bit closer to me, and this could be a little bit further back. Now if this came forward a little bit more from here to here, then it would be closer towards sort of my midground. Okay, so hopefully I didn't confuse you with that. Let me just draw that on another layer real quick, and then I'll delete that layer so I don't forget. All I did was this. It's just a simple principle in perspective that if I have a horizon line, and I know that horizon line, let's say I'm going to pick that vanishing point, and if I have a cloud that's right here, all I have to do is come back from that vanishing point, draw a line down below, bring that line down, that's where the base of that cloud hits, and then I bring that line down here, and that's basically would be the shadow of that cloud right below. That's all I just did right there. Okay, let me delete that layer. So when I come back here and I take a look at this right now, I have now clouds that are in here, but you see how after I drew the grid plane and now I put the clouds in there, do you see the depth that's starting to happen inside my piece by overlapping shapes? There's instantaneous depth because of those 3 rules. Number 1, I have something receding back in perspective. 2, I have the grid drawn. 3, I have shapes overlapping each other. And then number 4, which would happen when I paint, does anyone know what number 4 would be? Number 4 would be the value of the cloud in atmospheric perspective. So if cloud 2 and 1 are darker, and then I go paint 6 and 8 at like a 20 to 30% value really close to white, that'll even create more depth right there. So do you see how I have those 4 abilities on how I can create instant depth inside a piece if I'm working digitally? Okay, so now, thank God for layers, right? I'm going to come over here. And what I can do is I can take this, let me merge some of these. I'll keep them with the numbers in here. Let me merge those. So look, that's all in one. And what I can do is I can drop this down a little bit. Okay. And then this is the great thing about Photoshop, right? I can come in here now with my brush. And let me get off my drawing brush. I love that brush, by the way. That was a standard pencil brush that came with Photoshop. And I just adjusted a couple settings in the brush presets, and I love the way it sketches. It's one of my favorite drawing brushes for working digitally. And then I'm going to come back in here. Remember the cloud tree brush I had, right? So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here. Let me start painting cloud 1, and then I'll start working on cloud 6 a little bit. Okay. So first thing I like to do, and you do this in steps. If you don't do it right the first time, I might come in here and just start to, let me lower down that line drawing a little bit more, so it's not as dominant, somewhere about there where I can still see it. So now I could come in here and I could say, hey, this cloud is right up pretty close to me here. I'm going to paint down. I start with like a mid-gray first. That way I have some values that are in there that I could use. Okay. And then I'm going to come back in here. Let's say I'm going to throw some darks in there real quick now on this cloud. Get some darks underneath here. Okay, and then I could come over here and I could start putting some highlights maybe on the top here. Adjust my opacity here. And I just did that really quick, right? Let me get a little bit more white. I was almost there. I just have my brush set. That's pretty good. Get some of those whites in there. Blend some of that in a little bit in there. Sometimes when you look at that brush, you can see the little canopy top of the trees on it. That's why you need to, but that's what I love about it. It gets that pattern going, but if you put it on like 4 or 5, it blends it in a little bit easier. There we go. So now I have a cloud. So if I'm going to come back here and paint a cloud back here, okay, let's just take a look at some of my values right now. I'm at 50, 60. I still want to come in here and throw some darks in here because this cloud might be sort of right up in front of me. I have some really cool variations in here, little areas of dark and light. Okay. Little gradations, I call them. Gradients going, pitching one way to another. A little bit darker. Even in here as well, I can come back in here and just sort of stamp a couple times, maybe on the side there, maybe a little bit in there. Clouds have little variations. I'm not looking at any reference. I'm just doing this super quick. Okay. In terms of the lecture, I'm trying to keep these under 40 minutes. Okay. But now when I come back here, so if I swab this value right here, I'm like 60% there. That's a little bit, a little bit lower. If I come back here and paint a cloud here, I'm not going to be at those values. I'm going to be much, much lower because that cloud is way in the back right there. So let's just try that one real quick. So let me come over here. Let's just take my brush. Let me swab this sort of middle gray. If I look on the color picker, that's up about, that's 0, that's 100. That's about a 20% right there. So now as I come back in here, I'm just going to start to just brush in some top to my cloud. Put a little bit of highlight on that. And just let it be sort of, well, that's why I'm at 20%. Let me go back to about 50. Let me get maybe a little bit of gray underneath so I can see under it. Okay. Let's say I go back even a little bit further here. So what I'm trying to show you is this is also going to help is that if I have a nice rich dark cloud in front and then it gets a little bit lighter and then it gets even more lighter, more subdued, and now I get what I call lost and found edges, where here I might have detail where I see the little core shadows of part of those spherical shapes in there I can see underneath. Here it's starting to get subdued. I'm losing some of the detail. Then when I get back here where it's way, way, way in the background there, okay, it's going to just completely, so here I might come in, let me grab my smudge tool here. Hold on a minute. And if I blur that guy out, that's what that cloud's going to look more like because it's way in the backdrop there. So immediately I'm going to start to create some transition. Now, let me see what I can create just by copying and pasting. So I have this on a separate layer. So look, I can select that cloud up in the front. And I can say like, hey, I want to make that a little bit richer, a little bit darker there. Okay, let's copy, let's paste that. What if I take that cloud, move it up here? Actually, let me see if I put it under that layer. Bring it in the back. I'm going to transform it. Make it look a little bit different. And it's still too dark, right? But now if I go to levels, and I bring down the levels of it a little bit, start from the middle first, I make that a little bit lighter. You see how that starts to drop now behind that cloud? Because it's lighter. Okay. And so if I take that cloud now, see how it's dropping? It looks like it's behind this other cloud. It's a lot lighter. You can even adjust it a little bit more in here like this. That cloud pops in the foreground. Why? It's much richer. This is much lighter now. I have a nasty edge on there. No worries. Stamp tool. Stamp's great for clouds. I can come over here, stamp some of this. Just fade it over, blend it in. See that? Done. And I have another cloud there on top. Okay. Let me come back over here. Let me select this cloud layer that's here. I'm going to copy that. I'm going to paste that. I want to see if I can bring that up here. Let me transform it a little bit. Actually, I want to get it a little bit larger. I'm going to try to get that up, that number 2 cloud. Remember, that was real close to me. Let me come back into erase right now. I'm going to go down and like blend some of this in here a little bit. There we go. And then I'm going to go to levels real fast. I want to darken that guy. Get him a little bit darker. Okay. A little bit more white, a little bit darker value in there. Actually, I don't like that eraser isn't working too good in here. Let me just see if I can erase it hard like this and then blend it in real quick. Give me a minute. Now, if I wanted to, it's funny, I get these weird teardrop shapes sometimes that are all like the same. See that? Really similar to that cloud, so I want to try to avoid that a little bit. Sometimes I like to just do this and spin it upside down and see what I get. Yeah, that's sort of cool. There. Has a happy accident. Stretched out like that. And then see how this overlaps this? Maybe I fade some of that in there. So I'm going to come over here. Let's go to my eraser real quick. I have a soft edge eraser. Where is it? Right there. So I can take that now and then erase some of that hard edge that's in there and get that cloud to blend over a little bit more. There, like that, just a little bit. Okay. All right, so there, let's just say we keep that one in there. Let's throw another cloud back in here. Here, I'm just going to take this one I have right in here. See if I can use that. Let's copy. Let's paste that guy. Oh, you know what? Wrong layer. Let me Command Z real quick. Here we go. That's the one we wanted. Copy, paste. I'm going to... I didn't paste. Copy, paste. There it goes. And I'm going to drop this underneath the layers so it falls way in the back here. I'm going to lighten this guy up. And then what I'm going to do is not only am I going to lighten it up right now, but then I'm going to put a little bit of a blur on it. It's on a separate layer, right? So watch, I can go into Filter, I can go down to Blur, okay? And I could come over here, go to Gaussian Blur. Let's take a look at the cloud. It's at about 6.4. There. So now I blurred that cloud up right there. And by blurring it, it looks like that cloud, not only is it further back, but it can be up much higher because it's away from me. It's changed part of the distance. So when I come back in here and paint, might have all this wonderful milk and cranny detail up on this big cloud and some of it carrying into this cloud. Why? Because these two clouds here and here are the ones closest to me, and then all the other clouds that are receding back in perspective are not only dropping in value, but they're also going to get really loose. They're going to sort of blend out into the environment a little bit. So if I keep working from this point right here, and put another good, let's say another 30 minutes into this, I could start getting a pretty cool cloud structure that starts to take place. And now I'm not dealing with just what I showed you the last lecture, which is clouds stacked on top of each other going horizontally, which isn't bad. There's a different purpose for every background and environment you're working on. But now I'm actually creating clouds that might enhance part of my perspective. So let me pause for a minute. That way I don't make this into an hour or something recording. And then I'm just going to copy a couple layers, move some stuff around, and try to create more depth inside my piece. Then when I get it the way that I'm liking, I'm going to commit to all the layers. Then I'm going to go in there and start to render out a little bit more information on the clouds in front of me. And then I might even come in there and throw a light ray or something in there just to sort of enhance the overall feel of the sky. Okay, so I'll be right back. Okay, so I just came back for a minute. I was going to work for a little, and then I realized there's something I wanted to show you guys that could be pretty cool. I was just telling some students about that hard edge I have. Whenever you take something and you darken it in levels or curves, you're going to get a hard edge around it because you're increasing the overall darkness of that. And so what I need to do is I need to blend some of that in. See that line that's in there? So what I did is I just went back to my cloud brush, or you can go to a soft brush. So if I come over here, oops, and if I select my eraser, I have my tree cloud brush in there. So now as I come along here, and if I drop it down to like 20 or 30%, I could just come along this edge, and it'll get rid of some of that hard edge that's there, and it'll allow me to pepper in and create this feel that the cloud is sort of sitting on top of that other cloud. What I really liked about the way that stretched is at the very end here today, I'll come in here and I'm going to pepper some highlight detail underneath those clouds, and that'll become a big area of contrast. And since the cloud is right in front of me, closest to me, that's where I would see that in terms of the atmospheric perspective. Okay, I was going to come back and start working on this cloud. Let me merge a couple of these. This guy right here in the back. And something that I wanted to show you, instead of painting a cloud, which I could get in there and paint again, but watch how quickly I can make a giant cloud just from copying and pasting. Look, I'm going to take this guy right here. This is the part I was just about starting to do, and I thought, you know what, I should put this in the demo. I'm going to copy that, and I'm going to paste that. And look, I'm going to take this, I'm going to move it up right up on top here. I'm going to go to transform. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger for scale. Maybe squash it down a teeny bit more. Okay. And see, now it's sort of made a little bit larger cloud. And then what I'm going to do is I can go to levels real quick, and I can darken it just a teeny bit, because now it's coming forward, it's getting a little bit darker. So now I'm going to take that, let's duplicate that layer, and duplicate that guy. Bring him up a little bit more like this too. Okay. Transform him. Bring him up a teeny bit more like this. Go to levels, I'm going to make him a little bit darker as he's coming closer towards me. Like that. Okay. Now, I have 3 different versions here, and you can see the edges on those, so I need to merge those together right now. And this, I got to be careful of this. This one is starting to overlap. It's not going to overlap. I don't want to have a tangency where they're really close to each other. I want that to definitely fall behind that cloud, so it looks like this one is further in the back here. Okay, so let's say I'm going to leave that about right here, and what I'm going to do is come back to this lower one back here. I'm going to duplicate this guy. And I'm going to use him back there again, so I'm just going to duplicate him, make him smaller, and I'll come back to him in a little bit later, and we'll talk about him. He's really too defined right there, so what I'm going to do right now is just drop the opacity down. You see that? And just dropping the opacity down on him can get him to really sort of fade in the back here. Okay? Make him a little bit lighter if he's way in the back there. Alright, so let me come back here. Need to stay focused. Let me work on this cloud back here that's going to fade back in there. Let me find out what layer there. It's not that layer. There we go. It's this guy down to here. Let me merge all those. There we go. And then I have that other one in there. What was that one too? Okay, cool. Just merge them all together. So now I'm going to come in here. Let's paint a little bit. Let's just take our brush. I'm going to grab some of this, bring some of that over, bring some more fluffiness up here a little bit so it looks a little bit more fresh. Stamp tool. Stamp tool's your friend. Use it to get parts of the cloud moving around that you might not, you know, so it doesn't look so repetitive and look like the same brush stroke sort of going through. Go down to about 10% to create that sort of soft. I'm not going to have hard edges up here on this cloud. The sky is up, he's further away from me, he's going to be a little bit softer. Actually, delete that guy that's in there. I don't want him in there right now. That way I can move him around. So it's cool. Look at that. I now have this cloud there. I can move it around. I can bring it back in here. So what are some different things that I could do? Well, gosh, it's endless. I have it on a separate layer, so I could manipulate it. I could add color to it if I wanted to make it look like I did get a little bit of red in there by accident. So if I wanted to come over here and go to some color balance, you can see if I can throw a little bit of red in there or modify it a little bit, change a little bit of the sky color. So I have a gray cloud here and I have a little bit of a red over there. Okay, that's one thing that I could do. Command Z that. I could also distort that and warp it. Right, it's on a separate layer. So look, what happens if I duplicate part of that layer? Maybe I take part of this cloud in here. Okay, I'm going to go, say I want this to really fade in the background quite a bit. I'm going to lighten this up right now. I'm going to come down under blur. And let's go to Gaussian blur real quick. And we'll put a nice blur on that guy. I hate it when it does that. Yeah, I didn't ask for that. Close. And now with that blur, look, I can enlarge it like this. Now it's still on top, so I'm going to drop this underneath all the other clouds and see how it just went behind like that, because I dropped it. And then to make it a little bit lighter, I can come back and drop the opacity and see I just created that instant haze with sort of like another cloud being back there up above that. Okay. I like that idea of putting a little bit more red in there. Oops, wrong layer, my bad. That's the haze. Here we go. Why do I keep getting that? It's something to do with this Cintiq here, and it's annoying the heck out of me. Okay. All right, so you come back in here, start working on this a little bit more, get some other highlights. Now I'm going to pause and I'll work for a little bit, and then we'll come back. But I just wanted to show you how I just created one cloud very quickly by duplicating it on top of it itself, adjusting the levels, using a little bit of the stamp tool. Okay. And there's something else that I did want to show you guys really quick here. Give me a second. So I'll do it when I come back. Let me just save this. I'm going to work on this, and we'll jump right back into this. Okay. I just stopped for a second because I wanted to duplicate a couple of things and get it ready here. So one of the things that I did real quick is I'm going to come in and get some cool detail in here, but I created this cloud right here, okay, real quick, and I just want to show you just one tool that's really fantastic to use is the transformation tool with your clouds, because there's a lot you can do with it. So I painted this cloud here, and what I'm going to do is go to transform. I want to show you, look, I'm just going to take it, I'm going to rotate this cloud like this, and I'm just going to stretch the heck out of it like this. And if you look, what it does is by stretching it like that, it creates this sort of really mass shape that could be other clouds that are sort of stretched out that are really thin in the air. And I just did that by transforming it. And look, it actually creates this really beautiful pattern as well. See that pattern that's up inside there? I mean, I like that so much, I'm even tempted to blend some of that in there as well. So what I might do is duplicate this layer and then come back over here, take this. I'm going to try to fit it back in here, and where I have that line underneath, I'm going to erase around it, see if I can make it like a blended cloud. So I like the way it's stretched right now with the darks in there. I couldn't, if I wanted to paint that, that might take me a long time, but the way it automatically stretched that, it feels like something natural. It's sort of like that happy accident, and I'm a firm believer on incorporating stuff like that into part of your digital workflow, is getting used to having those sort of happy accidents. So now what I'm going to do is, now that I stretch that out, see how much lighter it is and it fades in the back? I can come in here with my eraser, and I'm just going to see what happens. I'm going to darken my line just a little bit here. So if I come back here, I had that line. So I can see a little bit, just like that. I can see my clouds underneath there. And then what I'm going to do is come back to that layer that I have, number 11 up here. And I'm going to just take my eraser and just come in here and lightly sort of erase around some of this. and get that cloud to sort of fit into place there. In fact, maybe I want to speed it up a little bit. I was just going to select it and erase, and then I'd have to go around and blend that edge in there, but that's all right. Let me just use my buttons from, opacity buttons here. I'm at 0 right now, erasing some of this. I'm going to drop down to about 40, get some of that to fade in there. Come over the edge right here. So I'm just going over my line that's underneath here. Fade some of that off. I want to get some of that right there so this becomes really distinct right here, that edge in there. Okay. And now what's cool is that if I come down here, let's go back to my line drawing, and if I start to take off my line drawing a little bit here, you see how that cloud just sort of faded in there in the back? It sort of went over the structure that I had, but it's now, just sort of faded in along the pattern that I drew, but it's just really light and faint. And see how it feels like it's sort of stretched out? I'm creating a lot more depth immediately with that, okay, just from what I did there. Now, if the only thing that did happen is when you look at it, I have that hard edge right there. So now I'm going to get in here. We need to get rid of that hard edge, right? Okay, so let me come back here with my eraser. Let's go to like 30%. I'm just going to sort of blend this in, go back, get some of the blue to come back in there. Okay, that's pretty cool. Now, something that I did earlier too, another step I wanted to mention to you. Let me show you that these key clouds right here. I'd added a teeny bit of red in there. Now, one thing about color is that adding any color into clouds really works a lot, especially warmer colors, because the sun is affecting the shape of the cloud, right? But also, warm colors are going to come closer to the viewer when you're looking at it, and cool colors recede from the viewer. Okay, so if I come in here, what that enables me to do is if I want to get this cloud like right up here in the front to really sort of pop and come close to me, okay, or let's say I want this one. Let me grab this one right here. Let's say that's the one that I want more than any. Okay, let me get the right layer here. Oops, I got too many layers. I need to commit to something. So that's, I'm going to call that my haze in the back there real quick. Let me just label it so I remember what's what. There we go. I'll call this my mid clouds. So I'm down to just 3 layers, which is fine. Okay, so there's mid clouds right there. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I have this one selected in the front here. If I go to color balance, I'm going to put a little bit more red in that guy, and see he'll start to come forward a little bit more because warms are going to come forward. And if I come back here, if I hit deselect, go to lasso, and select this cloud that I have in the back. Let me see what's all selected there. I missed a little bit of selection. And if I go to balance and I put a little bit more blue into him, okay, and if I take out a little bit of that red like that, by adding a little bit more cyan, see that? And a little bit more blue, he now fades back a little bit more, creates a little bit more depth. So the cloud with a little bit more red and yellow is going to pop a little closer to me, and that guy starts to fade back. Okay, and actually I wanted to dull down some of his detail that he had in here anyway, because he does get quite a little bit of brush detail in there, and I want this to pop. I'm going to come in there and paint highlights on there. So a couple things I could do is I could drop the opacity down on him, but see the problem is it's affecting the cloud in the front too. So that might be a reason for me to do this, is select him right there, copy, delete him, paste him, put him back in there, and now he's on a separate layer. So now if I want to drop that cloud back and make him haze in there a little bit more, so now your eye he's not as detailed, and I still have these little edges right in here, okay, that I can address as well. All right, give me a second. I want to see if I can show you one other option here that's a lot of fun. Okay, I'm going to come in here in a minute. Let me just blur in some of these. See, when you look, that's the part that kept catching my eye. It has the little strokes of the brush in there, and I want to fade those in there really easy. So what I can do is I'm going to hit my hotkey and I'm going to jump back to my smudge. Under my smudge I have the option to blur, okay? And if I come over here, double check, I don't have any defined brushes. I have a round fuzzy brush to blur, and I'm just going to come in with this brush, go down to like 20%, and just go over a couple of the edges. Maybe about, let's raise about 40, maybe about 60. I just want to blur these out a little bit more. Let's go to about 80 here. There we go. See how that's, I'm just blurring out those little hard edges that were on there. I don't need to see all that detail. Cloud's way in the back. And this way, what's cool, instead of doing the Gaussian blur on the whole thing, I'm actually picking parts that I want to blur. So I might keep something a little bit more refined, and then I can blur the edges of another area. Okay. And sometimes if blur's not going quite the way that I want, I come back over and I'll go to smudge. I'll bring that smudge tool in, which is a lot stronger, and just sort of drag it across a couple parts. Especially where I'm trying to get rid of that little hard edge. There, that's pretty good. Get rid of that in there. There. So now I have a cloud that's dropping in the back, like so. Okay? And I have some here in the front, and I have, now I'm looking at this guy and I'm like, okay, there's too much red in there. But that's all right. I tend to do this when I'm in the demo. I'm talking and I'm trying to focus at the same time. I wanted to come in here. There's some really cool patterns happening in there, and I could start getting some really cool highlights and get that cloud to pop out there. So let me address that in just a second here, and then we'll sort of wrap this demo up. Man, it's hard to talk at the same time while you're... As I come in here and I'm getting ready to pull out some highlights in here, I sort of have two approaches that I could do to pull out highlights in there. One is I can put a layer up on top and I can come in and paint and render some little highlights on there. And that's not a bad approach because I can control it. Another option I have is to quickly do it, I can use the dodge or the burn tool. Okay, that way if I do too much I can retract back. Now I haven't gone over that. A lot of you guys already know what that is. It's a common tool in Photoshop, but right here we have, if we click on this little icon right here, we have the dodge and the burn tool. And how that works, if I go into dodge right now and I come along part of my cloud here, the dodge also has an exposure setting. I'm at 50% here. And look at what happens. See my cloud here? If I come along and now I dodge on these little parts that I imagine popping out. Let me show it to you here. Let me zoom in real quick. See what I'm starting to do? I'm starting to find some really cool little highlights that I'm popping out. You see that? Getting some nice little milk and cranny sections of that cloud to really sort of pop. Look, I'm just barely touching it, and if I come in here, if I drop down to 20%, it's going to work a lot lighter. So I can use that benefit of the opacity setting, but in here it's called your exposure, to really get in here and start to pop, push and pull. Now the cool thing about the dodge and burn tools, let's say I do this and I'm like rendering like crazy. I'm like, yeah, best cloud that's ever been made in the world, right? And I look at that and it's too much. Well, I just come back over here and I go down to the burn tool, okay? And all it's going to do is it's going to go back on the opposite way. Oh, wait a minute there. Hold on a minute. Sorry, I thought my Photoshop was hiccuping. So there I have that super highlight, right? If I come back and I hold down, okay, I selected it. Under dodge is burn. If I go back, burn's going to allow me to push that back down to its original value and darken it, which is cool. So it's keeping all the original items there, okay, the original, I should say, pixels, and it's just darkening or lightening them for me. So now I could come in here, look, and I could just select some parts like this, go across part of my cloud, look, and I can add some really cool highlights real fast. But now I'm not painting. What am I doing? I'm darkening and lightening something that's already there. Okay, so look, I overdid this one. If I come back here, I go down to the dodge tool, come back over this. And if I lightly go over that, see it's fading it back in, getting some other highlights in there. Now I pressed down a little harder earlier, but that's okay. If it's something you don't like, stamp, boom, grab something. I can come back over here and just erase it and go back over it if I like. See, like that. There we go. So now I could come back in here and just keep working on part of my cloud and painting whatever I like. Okay? Let's go back to dodge and burn there. Sometimes, you know what's funny is that some people love this tool. I don't always use it that much because I just like the sensibility of having another layer and that there's paint on it. because there's more I can do. I can go in there and I can select little parts, little speckles, and add highlights. I could change the color of little areas. There's more than I can do, but the dodge and burn tool is pretty cool, and it can be really helpful on clouds because, look, I can get in here and I could really just see these natural patterns that are starting to pop out of some of this, and I could get this a lot of little miniature detail start to work and come to life out of that cloud structure in there. Heck, I could even make it look like there's lightning and whatever, and the dodge and burn tool is efficient for that, but I personally don't like to do it. The way that I like to do it is like this. I create another layer. I'm going to come over here. I have a couple different brushes that work differently. Sometimes I like working with this oily, I call it my oily hard edge brush, because it has sort of this oily look, but where I find it's really beneficial for me, and I gave you guys this brush too, is that when I come in here, and if I get that scratchy feel, and if I lighten it in opacity, it just blends in perfectly, and I like using it for little bits of detail. So look, I'm just going to come in here right now with this. Hold on. I kept changing. Sometimes when I hit brush on my keyboard, it just doesn't change, and I think that's something to do with the memory being used for this recorder. Okay, so now I have that set up. Let's do a straight line. There we go. And I'm at pure white. If I go 100%, there we go. So now let's go back in. Let's drop down to like 10 or 20. And what I can do is just come in here really lightly. And see that? I can just start to pencil in. And it just gets this really neat little hard-edged little details in here. Gets me to pop some areas out. And it's on another layer that's up above, you know? So I can blend it. I can tone it down a little bit. I just like that freedom to be able to get in here. And I could really just render the heck out of this cloud. And I noticed even the pressure sensitivity on that greasy brush that I'm using right now, it just works really nice too. If I tap in one area and then just try to get a little spread coming off of a cloud here. And it's all personal preference. If you don't like that brush, use whatever you want. It's just endless option of brushes, right?
Is there a hotkey function to like switch back from burn and dodge? Or you have to keep going back to that?
There is. You can go in and you can set it up that way. I don't have my machine set up for that, but there's a way to. Pretty sure there is, because once you get into the preset settings, you can put all your own hotkeys. I've never done it myself, but I'm sure there is a way to get in there. Because I mean, if you can flip canvases and use all these options and brushes, right. I know there has to be. Because like I have hotkeys set up. I mean, the tools I like to use, just the brush, the smudge, the stamp, especially smudge. I have that as my C, because S is something else. So I just get used to C, and then if I go back to, you know. So. Dodge and burn is O. If you hit shift while you hit O, it'll cycle. Is that it? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because you know what? I remember when I was on it, I thought I saw the standard default right here was just O. So yeah, if you hold shift, it'll probably rotate between. And then there's the sponge tool, which I don't really, again, personal preference tool. Anyway, let me change here. I like this. I have this one brush too that works pretty good. From I know I screw up his name, but amazing digital painter. Shadi Sadafi, and I like this too because it just spreads some nice little textures around. You know what? Again, I hit B and it doesn't go to the brush. That's the recorder. So let's come in here. Let me just see if I can spend about 10 minutes, maybe 5 minutes. 10 minutes will be too long. I'm trying to keep these under 40 minutes so YouTube doesn't like knock them down. So the reason why I'm putting lots of little detail in here and why I want to make part of this cloud structure really pop and render this out a little bit more is it's the cloud that's closest to me. And if I get these cool little details and little highlights in here underneath this, and I get part of this really to pop and look real nice, I'm seeing these natural patterns in here, and I just did this by stretching the darn thing with transformation tool. So once you get, effective and you get some confidence in there and you start throwing things around, bam, you can create a cloud structure pretty quickly, without much effort. Let me go, now that I zoom in here and look at that hard edge in there. I really need to get in there with my eraser and just lighten up that edge. Get that to blend in a little bit more. I don't want, that hard edge will show too. Sometimes you don't notice it digitally when you're working smaller and your painting's down like this. But then when you zoom in or if you go to print it, that hard edge will show in your print, and that's not good. So, I mean, that's one of the benefits, really zooming in and checking out your work here. Okay. And another way to get rid of that hard edge too is you could just stamp part of this and go to like 20% and just come along part of the edge here and throw a little bit more. But you just got to be careful you're not getting a line that gets in there, you know. All right. So that's pretty much it. I just wanted to show you. What did I just put a couple highlights in there, but just right now having what I have here, I don't have something that's as flat as the last lecture. You know, I have some detail here. I got another cloud here. I am not liking this red cloud now after I look back at it. I want to change that up a little bit more, so let me adjust that real quick here. But I have enough here that I did pretty quickly that I could really work off of. I can enhance, I can modify a little bit more. Let's go back to balance. I'm going to strip out some of that red right now and pull it back down a little bit. There's a little bit too much red. Just like that. So there, I mean, I like what I'm doing there, and I would, again, for me it's hard to sort of talk and do this at the same time. I would take a break from this, come back, look at what I have. What's most important to me, what I don't have in here right now, is I'm just doing a rough demo on clouds and perspective. My environment is going to be key. So if I come back on here and turn on my line drawing, okay, and look at my line drawing, however I start to build my environment now is going to be really important, because I might end up coming back into my clouds and dulling down my clouds quite a bit. Okay, because let's say if I ended up in my line drawing over here, let me go to brush. Let's say right up in here, let me get that blue back. Let's say right here I end up having some type of a giant. Okay, why is it not working? Brush, 100%, here we go. Nope. All right, let me see here. I'm on the layer, and is it the recorder? What's going on? I'm on brush, I have the blue. Okay, maybe it's a recorder. All right, headache, finally got that to go. So look right here, let's say in my sketch I end up having this huge military industrial base that's up here or something, right? Well, then I might not want to have tons of detail in that cloud, and I might subdue that cloud a little bit more, so the biggest area of interest in contrast ends up being right over here, let's say, if that's what I was working on. But I have a structure. I painted a base backdrop for my painting. I have some cool information, some clouds in it. What I really wanted to go over today is I just wanted you to think about stacking over clouds, other clouds on top of each other, having clouds closer to you be a little bit darker, having clouds behind you get a little bit lighter. And like anything else in Photoshop, I just did this, pretty fast today, but if you get in here and if you spend like a day painting clouds, you just become a cloud master really quickly, because you get used to the transitions and the gradients. And it's like anything else. Some of you, when you jumped into painting that glossy sphere and dealing with a surface, it was sort of a struggle at first. And then after you nailed it, you're like, wow, I can paint glossy spheres all day. It's that easy. It's the same thing with anything that you're painting. I'll jump in and start painting tundra rocks with snow on it. I struggle for the first half an hour, and all of a sudden I just dive into it, and then I'm just nailing it all the time. So it's the same thing here. The point is that you have fun. Think about, just the core principles we tried talking about today. Let me bring those back up. Having a grid inside your piece, okay? Being able to look at, hold on a minute, where did I put that other grid? Sky copy, no, that's not it. What did I do with it? Anyway, having the sky grid and then looking at those cloud shapes. Let me turn these off and let's just go down. That way we can go over sort of what we were talking about here. That was the demo from before. Maybe I deleted it by accident, which happens. I think I did delete it because I don't see it anywhere. It's not it. So yeah, I just went and checked and I did delete it. But again, we talked about it earlier. The fact that you're thinking of your sky as a grid with shapes overlapping other shapes and depth, that's really, really going to help your painting quite a bit. So as you start, and what's cool about this too is, I have some different layers. I was working, these are from yesterday's lecture down here, but as I start looking at some of these, I'm like, hey, I like just the use of some of these clouds. Part of me wants to just take a couple of these and move these around and see what else I might come up with, I might come up with something totally different. Like now I look at it, I'm like, what if that value is just too dark up there? What if I need to drop these down a little bit more like that? And then what if I can find a way to use this other cloud somehow? Now that's a great thing about layers is you can, use a lot of this to your benefit and manipulate and make something that you never even thought of. And you're doing it pretty fast. Okay? So that was my haze layer because I was sort of wondering, what if I duplicate that now? What if I bring that over here in the foreground? Make it a little bit larger. I was trying to see if I can create that. See that like C starting to happen there? If I get that effect like a C that's happening, if I darken this a teeny bit more, and then if I take this haze and then I lighten that a little bit, like that, I might be able to create a real cool effect in there too. And then I still have this, just dealing with 3 layers here. That big puffy guy there. I'm going to flip them horizontally. Wondering if that could look like it's over part of the horizon. If I drop off the opacity, get it to drop down. Pretty cool. That's pretty cool. Look at that. I just created a whole nother little sunset or little field, or not sunset, but a whole another cloud variation to work off of. And I did it really quick just by duplicating, stretching. So to wrap it up, remember the grid plane. Shapes overlapping other shapes in perspective. Okay. Shapes receding back in scale, getting smaller. Example of clouds as they get smaller. Dark to light, transition in atmospheric perspective. Items that are closer to you are darker. As they recede back, they get lighter. And not only lighter, but they get blurry. We get lost and found edges, and they dissipate and fade off. Okay, I actually like that. I think that's pretty cool. I like what's happening right there a lot. Because now I have that rough sketch in here. What I was going to start doing next in tomorrow's demo is go in here now and start painting some tundra in there. I'm going to start to block out some rocks and mountains and then create a little base station, and then I'll paint in a foreground, and voila. You guys have sort of, you're on your way to developing your first speed paint or your first rough out of a digital painting. Okay? So we'll see you guys back tomorrow.